And all of the inflation of the 1970s, people try to say, well, the inflation of the 70s was because of an oil shock, it was because of this. No, it was because of the devaluing the dollar. That's why oil prices went up. Oil prices didn't go up. The value of the dollar went down. That's all that happened. The price of oil is about the same as today as it was in 1970. Oil was $3 a barrel in 1970, but gold was $35 an ounce. You know, the relationship is pretty much the same today. A little bit different, but not much. Even though oil is $70 a barrel, $75 a barrel, it's gone up from 3 to 75. It's barely changed in terms of real money, in terms of gold, you know, about the same. So we had all that inflation. But what the world did, and this was the mistake the world made, instead of, you know, once we told the world there's no gold behind the dollar, they should have said, fine, we're going back on the gold standard. We're not on the dollar standard. They stopped with the dollar. And that was the problem, because when, you know, if you own the Norwegian krone, and someone says, well, what gives the krone value? What's it backed by? Well, it's backed by dollars. Okay, well, what gives the dollar value? Well, it's backed by gold. Okay, so in effect, the krone was backed by gold, because it was backed by the dollar. But now, when the dollar is no longer backed by gold, so, well, what's the krone backed by? Well, it's backed by dollars. What's the dollar backed by? Nothing. Well, then the krone is backed by nothing. So it doesn't work. So, but instead, they kept accepting the dollar as if it was still gold. And the minute that happened, our politicians, well, hey, this is great. This is fantastic. You know, we could dole out whatever goodies we want. And our whole economy was able to degenerate from a manufacturing economy to a service sector economy, because all the stuff that we didn't manufacture, we can get by printing money. And so we flooded the world with this paper, and we got all our stuff. But our whole standard of living, all the malls, all the shopping centers, all that is all about the dollar being the reserve currency. If it wasn't the reserve currency, we couldn't import stuff unless we can export stuff. That's how all the other countries work. So this is what's about to change. That whole lifestyle is going to change. And this is the real crisis. This is the real collapse that's coming. Maybe it's in 2010. Maybe it's in 2011. That, you know, and the dollar falls, and then the Fed, you know, there's all this talk about the Fed exit strategy. How are we going to exit from this monetary policy? There's no way out. There's no exit. The only way to exit is not to enter. You know, once you leverage everybody up like this, you can't take that leverage away. Right? Because if the government raises interest rates, all the entities they bailed out are going to fail again. Home prices are going to start falling. Stock market's going to start coming down. And now we have a bigger mess because there's even more debt. It's a bigger problem. So if they didn't have the guts to deal with the problem last year, how are they going to deal with it next year when it's even bigger? You know? But maybe they'll have no choice. Right now, they're able to do it. The government is able to bail out everybody because Germany, because Japan, and China bailed the government out. But when that ends, so then the choice for the Federal Reserve is going to have, and the government's going to have a very big choice. And in a couple of years, maybe next year. The choice is, when the world moves away from the dollar, we are either going to dramatically increase interest rates, not just 2% or 3%, but 8%, 10%, 12%, and just let the chips fall where they may. Let housing prices come down. Let banks fail. Let depositors lose their money. Let pensions fail. Don't bail them out. Let people lose their jobs. That is what they're going to have to do to avoid an even bigger disaster. See, that's the good choice. If they do that, we're lucky. Right? If we just have this major collapse, you know, we got off easy. Because the alternative is the politicians stick to the playbook. And they say, well, more stimulus. If foreigners won't buy our bonds, then we're going to buy them, we're going to print the money, and we're going to just print. And we're going to do exactly what Zimbabwe did. We'll do exactly what Weimar Republic Germany did, exactly what Argentina did. The politicians will try to print their way out of it, and that is the biggest disaster. And that is the collapse that I'm prepared for. That's what my whole investment strategy is all about. It's about the collapse of the value of the dollar, and what that also does to undermine our free market economy, because you can't have a market economy where money is collapsing. And the other problem is, as this economy is falling apart, instead of the government understanding that its regulations and its taxes are the root cause of these problems, they are regulating and taxing even more. And we're moving more away from a free market model to central government planning, to decisions about resource allocation being made in Washington for political reasons, not being made in Main Street by individual entrepreneurs with a profit motive, And this has never worked. I mean, there have been all kinds of intellectuals who thought they knew more than the market, that they can allocate resources and make everybody's life better, and they end up making everybody's life miserable because it doesn't work. And that is where we're headed. And the people who think, oh no, this will never happen, again, they're the same people that said everything was great. A couple of years ago, that real estate prices could never fall. Or they say, well, if America goes down, the whole world's going to go down, so you're going to... No, the whole world... I think that we are on the verge of a renaissance outside the United States. It's going to be like, we're liberating the peasants. It's been a revolution. Because we're like a royal... America is like a giant, royal court. And we're just partying, and we're extracting a tax from all the peasants all around the world that have to support us, because we live off of their productivity. And it's not going to hurt them if we stop consuming. Because if we stop consuming, they're not going to stop producing. They're still going to produce. They're just going to get to consume it instead. And that's actually the fun part of the whole process, right? It's enjoying the fruits of your labor, not laboring. And that's what's going to change. People think that demand is the key. Demand means nothing. Supply is the key, right? Everybody demands things. I have a 7-year-old son, right? He wants everything he sees. It's innate. I don't need to stimulate his demand. What gives meaning to his demand is my ability to buy the things that he wants. And the same thing is true of me, right? I flew here on a commercial airplane. I'd rather fly here in my own private jet. Why didn't I do that? It's not because I didn't want to. I'd like a 700-foot yacht with a submarine and a helicopter, and a whole staff of women. Why don't I have that? Right? It's not because there's not. I don't want it, and if, I need government stimulus. I can't afford it. And the same. When the first plasma TV came out, everybody remembers when they first came out. How many people actually bought one when they first came out? But everybody wanted one. I thought it was like, oh, that's really cool. I want one of those. Why didn't I buy it? It was 10 grand. That's why I didn't buy it. And now 10 grand was a lot of money back then. But now I have a whole bunch of these plasma TVs because they're cheap. Right? So what enabled me to buy it? Was it my demand? No, I always demanded it. It was supply. It was the manufacturing process. As companies became more efficient and were able to produce more TVs, that's what enabled me to buy them. It was the supply coming up. My demand was always there. And that's the same thing. The rest of the world is going to function fine. There are people in China who want things. We try to pretend that Americans are unique in our desire to consume, and that without us, nobody would want anything. That's all nonsense. Right? It's like people can imagine there's a factory worker in China, and they're making washing machines for clothing. And as they're working on these things, 12 hours a day working for low, they're making these things, and they're thinking to themselves, "Gee, I'm glad I don't have one of these." Or you think the Chinese like riding bicycles to work in the rain? You don't think they prefer to have a car? It's all a question of what they can afford. But meanwhile, they're producing all the stuff. They actually can't afford it. We're the ones that can't afford it because we don't produce it. But the governments are changing. China has $2.3 trillion in reserves. That's $2.3 trillion of purchasing power that was transferred from Chinese citizens to Americans. Think of all the things that Chinese could have afforded if the government didn't take all that purchasing power away from them. That's all going to change. And when it changes, it's the same thing as prices coming down. The minute the Chinese government depegs the currency and lets the dollar sink, that's like putting everything on sale for the Chinese. Everything they want to buy gets cheaper. They'll buy more. And it's like everything that we want to buy gets more expensive. And we get priced out of the market. That is what is going to happen. And what we can do as individuals, unfortunately, you can help me in my campaign, and we can try our best to prevent this disaster from happening. And if for some reason I get to Washington, I'll do what I can to talk some. They're gonna. You see how long I can talk. Imagine if I was filibustering on the Senate floor. They would know I was in that Senate. Barack Obama would have to listen to this. In fact, C-SPAN might be one of the most popular shows, networks, if I get there. But